All right, now Gauteng is looking to the Township Economic Development Bill to increase business opportunities and create employment. This as the ANC's Economic Transformation Committee reaffirmed its commitment to the recovery plan. But will that translate into action? With the cost of living at a record high, how can we ensure these policies are implemented? Let's unpack this with the public policy specialist at Wits School of Governance, TK Pooe. Thank you very much, TK, for your time here on eNCA. Now, with the elective conferences coming up, what is it that the ANC should actually be looking out for as it elects its leaders in terms of, improving how the youth unemployment has increased, or rather, even if it's decreased, the numbers are still alarmingly high?
Afternoon, and thanks for having me. Look, I think three things really one should look out for. Now, obviously, we're being idealistic because we're speaking about the ANC here. First thing I think you should look for is performance, as in the people going forward. Have they been part and parcel of the problem, or are they new people actually bringing new ideas to the table? I think that's critically important as it relates to my second point, which is what is actually the development vision for not just townships, but actually rural areas. I know the Gauteng province released in, I think, 2021, its bill on the township economy. And look, it is to be welcomed. But however else, with many things that are the ANC, it speaks about what should happen. And we all know, everybody knows what should happen. We should be formalizing more businesses. We should be allowing more businesses that are informal to be able to trade. And most importantly, we should be asking, how do we finance and actually basically rejig the whole of the township areas? So that it speaks about that, but everybody knows this. It's not a secret. But unfortunately, it doesn't go a step further. And I think we need to that's the second point. And I think thirdly, and I think probably this is the most important one, and this is the thing, you cannot have a township economy without looking at what I think you talked about, the broader economy of the country. If we don't actually have proper industrial policy, if we don't actually have a vision for what do we take out into South Africa to the rest of the world, and how do we actually put value-added services onto that, if we don't have that broader topic, we're speaking about a very small, already suffering township economy. So I think the bigger question is, does the ANC actually have a bigger economic development plan, and where does the township actually fit into this, and does it have the relevant people to actually push this forward? And on all three of these accounts, look, I can only use history as a precursor for what my answer is going to say. I think it's a sad no, really.
And I mean, if you look at the policies around township renewal and township economy, especially renewal, I don't think South Africa really has. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. In terms of the township, the most we have is the Constitution and perhaps, RDP houses.
Yes, I actually go a step further, because I think when people sometimes speak about the township, the way I always say it is to say, look, you have to understand why townships were created in the first place. They were created as dormitories for a lot of African people to really live in, and a lot of black people. So what really should have happened is to say, how do you radically, and I know that's a word which we don't often like using, but I think for lack of a better word, how do we actually radically, systematically change that? One of the arguments I've always put forward is to say, in this day and age, I come from a township in Everton. I don't understand why municipal offices and provincial offices are still in towns. If they were to simply take municipal offices or even provincial departments, put them in certain locations, you're already bringing money into there. Because one thing we do know about government is, by virtue of having those offices there, you're sort of already bringing stimulus into the economy. So one of the things I think has really been missing when it comes to how people think, or how this government thinks about the township economy, it's almost they think about it as a by the way, like, oh yeah, there's those poor people that live in the township. Let's give them something. Let's speak about the informal economy. Let's speak about spaza shops. What they really are missing is the point that there is money in the township. And if they actually had something to systemically change how we understand the geography, for instance, we speak about the green economy. Why aren't we thinking about how do we actually get green transport into townships? And I know people aren't going to like this, where we can actually get rid of taxis, where we can actually say, how do we get proper trains and buses that are operating 24/7 so that even women are safe when they want to do trading, so that we can actually have businesses that run 24/7 in township areas? And how do we actually do that segregation between what is and where businesses should be operating and where people should be living? So unfortunately, when it comes to big systematic ideas, that's not really the forte of the ANC when it comes to public policy. One only has to read the recently released document, where I think only when you go to page 158 do they start speaking about a township and an A economy, but they don't really link them together in such a way that they bring you something new, which says, wow, this is really changing 2 decades of underthinking in this area.
Exactly. And in terms of the policy documents that were recently released, you alluded to those. How do we read them, in terms of, it doesn't look to me as if anything has changed from previous years that these documents were released. It looks like the same old thing.
Look, I use maybe a cultural example, which is to say, we all know if you really do want to get married, you need to go through the Lobola negotiations, you need to go through uncles. When it comes to economic development policy and ANC thinking, they're still at the point where they believe they're married. But in actual fact, they're still at the point of negotiating with their uncles, where they've not really passed through that stage at all. So there's a disjuncture between what they think has happened and how the rest of South Africa is living. And I think they really would be wise to catch up to the point that, listen, there's nothing wrong with admitting that, listen, we've really messed up these last 2 decades. We've done some good. I'm not going to be one of those people who says ANC has done nothing. You can't say that about the party. They've done something in government. But I think when it really comes to changing the big economic narrative for African people in townships and rural areas, as I'll stress, look, the ANC needs to be honest and says they haven't done really much in that area.
150th something pages, a township. Well, thank you very much for your time here on All Angles. That was TK Pooe. He's a public policy specialist at Wits School of Governance.